Hello, everyone. I haven't thought you will be there after the party, but I guess we are doing this. So programmers, like many programmers, have this thing where they prefer to spend 30 minutes writing a regex instead of just to avoid spending 5 minutes of manual work. So who's with me on that? Yes, yes. So I have the same thing, but with tooling. Over the years, I built a lot of tools that helped solving me a problem that I had in hand at the moment. But after I created them, I haven't really used them that much. But what I learned while building these tools is that building useful and understandable tooling is actually really hard. So I started paying a bit more attention to the tools I have been using every day, particularly to Chrome DevTools. I started getting involved with DevTools a bit. I started reporting bugs, started using beta version of the browser. And actually, reporting bugs is pretty fun, and it's also probably the easiest way to give something back to the browser vendors for the free software, excellent free software you are getting. Anyway, when you report bugs, you also get to see the discussion that devs have with each other about your bug, and eventually you also see the fix. So that's how I learned that DevTools are actually software. And my favorite type of software, open source software, built in my favorite type of technologies, web technologies, highly recommended, by the way. So I started with a bit of encouragement and help from Jason Lester. I started contributing to Chrome DevTools. And I started small. This is one of my pull requests. It's a one-liner. And what it does, it adds a color picker to the current color property. And if you are wondering what current color property does, it allows you to set a color on the caret, which is what? You don't see that, but this is red. Anyway, this is super exciting, and if there's one thing I want you to take from this talk is that caret color is a thing. Anyway, over time I got a bit more adventurous and eventually contributed a bigger feature, which is cookie editing, which I'm super excited about, but because this is something I've been missing for so many years. So I started to engage with the DevTools community, started to observe the comments and the news on DevTools. I started comparing DevTools from different companies with each other. And what I observed is that there are many patterns that are repeated between these tools, which seemed a bit strange to me. Don't get me wrong, our tools are really great. Like just last week on Google I/O, I saw Android developers going mad about network and profiling panels, and web developers on the stage only rolled their eyes because we had those for like, what, 10 years? And for each of these browsers, there is like a dedicated team that works on DevTools, and some of these teams even have designers. So there is a little bit of competition going on, and we are all enjoying fruits of that. This doesn't change the fact, though, that all four major DevTools share a lot of common patterns, at least in the main panels. So I started to wonder where this comes from and for how long this is happening. So I did a little research. And this segment is sponsored by the Internet Archive. So some of you may actually think that web tooling started with Firebug. That's not true. I went a bit back in time and learned that just 1 year after JavaScript was created, Microsoft released JDebugger. What's JDebugger? It's Microsoft's way of avoiding using word Java, which I think we can all relate to. And JavaScript JDebugger was followed by JavaScript Debugger by Netscape. And as you can see, it looks pretty much the same as to what we have today. It has a call stack. You can put breakpoints. And there is a console where you can evaluate some expressions. These tools were separate from the browser, so they weren't extremely convenient to use. But in 1997, Microsoft released something called Interdeath. Interdeath was part of Visual Studio and had some nice tools for web developers. There was HTML outline, which looked a bit like our Elements panel. There was a JDebugger built in. There was CSS editing. So pretty neat tool. However, this tool was meant for building dynamic web pages with ASP. And it had a lot of ActiveX, ASP, databases going on. So this wasn't really dedicated for web developers. It also costed like $500. So it's not like everyone was using it. So for normal developers, it was usual to, when developing for the web, it was usual to guess a lot and use something called alert method. And alert method is a precursor of console logging things. And I even found a book that has a whole chapter about alert method, while it seems like it's pretty easy to understand. And this was the reality of developers back then. In 2002, Firefox started being built. And in 2004, it was officially released with JavaScript console that you can see here. What you can do in this console was evaluate some expressions, also see the errors. But there was no way to print something from your script to the console. Thankfully, Firefox came with a system of plugins since version 1.0. And web developer community, as it grew, started creating tools by their own. So there were a lot of bookmarklets. There were a lot of extensions. And I want to highlight the top one. This is the Web Developer Toolbar. I don't know how many of you have used it. Yes, that's what I thought. It exists for like 15 years, and it's still being developed by the same guy. So this is quite amazing, and it has a lot of tools that never made it to the mainstream DevTools, so it's still useful. 2 years after that, IE also got their developer toolbar, which was somehow similar. And in 2006, Joe Hewitt came to web development after years of doing desktop development. And in his own words, he felt naked without print. And so he created Firebug. And he created a print file method that later became a console log. He actually is the author of most of the console API that we know today. So the first version was a bit strange. It was only the console, but you could already inspect elements. They just ended up on the console. And another quote from Joe, "I'm always surprised to hear that people call Firebug innovative. It shows just how weak the web developer's toolbox has become, that something as old school as console would be considered novel." Many of the concepts that Joe incorporated in Firebug were taken from the extensions and bookmarklets that I showed you on the previous slide. Version 0.4, which was released only a couple of months later, was already looking like something that we have today. It had console debugger inspector, and there was you could change the DOM dynamically. And let me remind you, this is 11 years ago. Firebug grew in strength, attracting many devs to Firefox, and created a community around it. At some point, Firebug even became extensible itself, so that people can write plugins for Firebug. Just a couple of days after Firebug was released, Safari released something called Web Inspector, which was a standalone tool for inspecting HTML and CSS. It also released, in the same time, a standalone JavaScript debugger. And over 2 next years, Safari did an impressive progress of their inspector. Here is a version from 2008, which looks almost like something we have today. And 2008 was also the year where Chrome was created. It was a fork of WebKit, so it also inherited the Web Inspector. Over the time, Firebug started losing its momentum and was eventually replaced by the built-in Firefox DevTools and deprecated. Firefox DevTools copied most of the Firebug functionality, but also added a couple of interesting niche tools like Canvas debugger and audio editor. Meanwhile, IE was replaced by Edge, and all IE DevTools were replaced with the brand new F12 tools, which brings us to today. So my little research confirmed that concepts were jumping from one DevTools to another, and once they were created by Joe or by authors of these plugins that I showed you, they were never really revisited. So I thought there is a lot of space for innovation, and I started looking for some inspiration. So I started talking with people from other professions that use tools every day. They, same as we do, spend a lot of time next to the computer with their tooling. So I wanted to see what that tooling looks like and if we can steal something from it. So here's Kasia. Kasia is a structural engineer. She makes sure that projects created by architects can actually be built and won't collapse. She decides how thick the walls and ceilings have to be, what goes inside of them, and where additional columns have to be put. Kasia showed me some of the tools she uses in her day-to-day work. One of the core ones is AutoCAD, which, quite amazingly, is just a huge, complicated paint application. And 2 things I really liked about it is that you had infinite canvas where you can put your images or drawings all around. You can then copy them and put them into the main image. So you had this huge space that you could customize, and she told me that she and her colleagues all work a bit differently on that canvas. She also did the color coding. This was only for herself, because when these things get printed, they were black and white, so she did it to easily see different types of walls. Yeah, and this is Bolko. Bolko is a photographer and filmmaker. Here you can see him with a super expensive 1,000 frames per second camera making some ad for a sports company. Bolko showed me some of the tools he uses for editing the videos. So this is Vinci Resolve. This is what cool kids in video editing use nowadays. What I liked about it is that it had this clear separation of different tooling for different phases of editing the video. So here you can see that we are working with sounds for the video. Here we are adjusting the colors. And here we have a timeline where we put little clips together into an actual whole movie. What I really liked about this part is that you can easily go back and forth in time and just jump from one part of the project to another. So this is Ola. Ola is a scientist and works at a university. She does everything from designing to producing integrated circuits. Here you can see her with Buffer. during the production of the integrated circuit. She also designs and creates measurement and control systems that gather and process information from photon detectors that are used in synchrotrons. She also showed me some software that she uses. It's called LabVIEW. And what I liked about LabVIEW, again, infinite canvas, but also creating components. So here she's creating some kind of a simple component out of smaller blocks. And in this way, she can build very complicated systems out of very small and easily understandable components. She also showed me a cool feature of debugging. So here we see like these little dots are the events going between the different modules, and they also update the values that are on these modules. Here is Jakob. Jakob is a game programmer, and also after hours, he designs and creates his own games. He told me about Unity, Visual Studio, and Unreal Engine that he used in his previous company. So this is Unity, and what I really liked about Unity is that it's super customizable. You can take any of these panels and put it anywhere you want. You can close some of the panels that you don't use or open some that are closed by default. So it was very much customizable. And what I also liked is that the main tool, the inspector, was changing the tools that were shown depending on what you were inspecting. So when you were interacting with 3D model, the tooling was different than when you were interacting with a sounds or a mesh. He also showed me, again, idea of the infinite canvas and building from the blocks. This is a tool that is used by game designers, so not really game programmers, to create some simple behavior trees. And this is, again, something very similar to what Ola was using. I also talked with Patricia. Patricia is a graphic designer. She does everything from drawing icons to putting together bigger layouts. And a lot of people here are probably familiar with Adobe tools, like Photoshop and Illustrator, but the new cool kit on the block is Sketch. So what Sketch allows you to do, besides infinite canvas again, it allows you to create components. So here we are creating a component for the header. We'll create another one here. And then we'll have a library of components where we can see them. We can see them. We can manipulate them here. But when we go back to the actual pages, we won't be able to manipulate these components there. We will be kind of redirected to the library, which is also super neat. So these were a couple of highlights from the interviews that I conducted. I have much more, but I didn't want to bore you. I learned a lot of stuff. I saw some ideas that we already have in our DevTools. And I also saw some ideas that maybe we can steal. So with these ideas in mind, I started creating small prototypes and mocks. So basically what you will see now is fake, but most of the time can be done. So I really like the idea of the ContextAware Inspector that I showed you in the Unity. And for many elements in DOM, it doesn't make sense to change the styles, for example, for meta tags. So I thought I can create something a bit more useful. So here, when we are selecting a meta tag, we get preview of the elements, a useful preview, and also a description. And for SVG paths, we get an SVG editor. This is absolutely possible to implement today, and actually, SVG Editor is something that I'm working on, and hopefully I will be able to deliver it to both Chrome and Firefox DevTools at some point. The other thing that I've been thinking about a lot was ability to concentrate on a single element of the page. So let's say you have a huge page, and you are working on this little small part that you have to scroll to every time you reload the page, or that you have to click something for it to show up. So I didn't like this workflow, and I thought it would be good to be able to concentrate, like change the tools in a way that we can concentrate on a single element. So seeing components in LabVIEW and symbols in Sketch made me realize how something like this could look like. I also figured out that this idea plays really nicely with web components. So here we have a couple of web components, and we can click on a single one. It will be focused. We can then work on it. We have a library of all web components that we have on page, so we can easily switch between them. And if we do a small change in the component, we don't have to reload the whole page. We should be able to reload only this component because it's self-contained. And then when we are finished, we can go back to the page view and still have the state. Since we are talking about state, I really, really like the idea of being able to go back in time as Bolko did with his tools. So I thought this can be also useful to us. Oftentimes, we have to reload the page just to test a different pathway in our app. I think that timeline would actually save us a lot of time and a lot of these page reloads. So here we have a to-do app. And as we are interacting with it, there is a timeline being created. So now we can easily go back in time just by moving our mouse over the screenshots. And we can create an alternative reality where we start interacting with the app again. And again, we can go back in time. And even we can start from the very beginning, which is equal to page reload, but a bit faster. So this is, again, possible. This actually, we did a first step towards that direction. Edge team has time travel debugging in their DevTools, in their JavaScript engine. But adding time travel debugging to DOM, to local storage, to cookies, to like all APIs, will be a bit more tricky and cumbersome, but I'm not actually the first one who came up with this idea. There were one more DevTools that happened in the meantime, the Opera Dragonfly DevTools. Have someone used them? Yes, a couple of people. These were pretty sweet, and actually, while playing with them, while doing the research, I found some features that were never ported into other DevTools, which is interesting. So David Story, who worked on the Opera DevTools, he actually came up with this idea way before me and tried implementing it. Now he works for Edge team, so let's see. And the infinite canvas. It was almost in every tool that I showed you, so I started to wonder if we can somehow incorporate this idea into our tooling. And I think it would work really nicely with the emulation. So emulating single device is cool. But how cool would it be to have multiple devices on the canvas in the same time? And you can move them around and customize the space as you want. You can add more emulated devices, you can add real devices that are connected to your PC, or you can add remote devices from browser stack. And you can group these devices, put these devices into groups, so that you can control them all in the same time. And I started to think that we can push this idea even further and have on this canvas multiple subpages of the same page, so it's easy to see when you are changing one component, how it influences other parts of the website, or even have multiple projects on the same canvas so that everything is only zoom and scroll away. So these are some of my ideas about the future of the DevTools. I'm pretty sure that many of you here have ideas of your own. So how do we make them a reality? Thankfully, most of the DevTools are open source, and you can contribute today. I would like to especially highlight the Firefox DevTools, which are on GitHub, are written in React, and have a wonderful community, so it's really easy to start. So I hope I'm super excited about the future of the DevTools, and I hope I got some of you a bit excited too. But if there's one thing I would like you to remember from this talk, it's that caret property is a thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Konrad. So we do maybe have a couple of minutes available for questions. Martin, why don't I invite you up onto the stage and get set up while we perhaps take any questions. Are there any questions from the audience, first of all? Otherwise, I have a couple of my own. Any hands? OK, well, perhaps, Konrad, I've got a couple. I mean, really amazing stuff that we're seeing there that you're kind of imagining. But
right.
You know, what's the biggest kind of gap that you see? I mean, what's the biggest failing in the DevTools? Because I certainly remember the days of alert, debugging with alert and having alert in a loop and then trying to catch it fast enough. And we've come a long way from there. But what do you think is the biggest gap that we need to solve at the moment?
Are you really that old that you remember this alert stuff? Oh, wow. OK, so the biggest gap, I think, well, maybe this idea of the infinite canvas is a good one, because we really don't work the same way with web as our users do. So maybe rethinking how browser for developers should look like is a good idea. And again, Firefox did a first step into that direction. They have Firefox DevTools for developers, like a special edition, which is really nice. So yeah, I would go in that direction.
I have one more. Martin, if you're ready, you could be coming and be setting up if you like to minimize the risk. There we go. So the other thing that I find challenging with these tools as they're getting richer is discovering features. So have you explored very much about how the user experience or the developer experience is evolving as the tools get richer and more sophisticated? Is that something that worries you at all?
Yeah, so that's actually the reason why some of these DevTools teams got designers to improve the UX and discoverability of the features. But the number of features still grows, and different DevTools, different teams try different things. Mostly it's documentation and trying to be there for the users, trying to promote all the new stuff. So this is also good. But the fact is, like, looking at all these interviews that I had, the fact is that no one really uses 100% of their DevTools. Everyone I asked uses like 10% and knows maybe about 20 more. But you don't have to feel bad that you don't know everything, because not everything is useful to you, like the audio editor that only Martin uses, for example.
What? Say what?
Thanks ever so much. I think we'll call it a day there. So thanks ever so much, everyone. Thank for me, Konrad Dzwinel, everyone. Big round of applause. Thank you, Konrad.